And welcome everybody to God's Views on Political News. Glad everybody's here today. I know everybody's a little worried, can't hear you. We tricked you. We were just kind of putting that logo out there and just coming on later, so we're here. So hope everybody can hear us now. Bill, how are you today?
You want me to answer that?
Ah, Bill doesn't want to really answer that one, I'm sure.
No, let's just say it's been a challenging day. Got off to a rather startling beginning this morning. So, but anyway, it's going to be okay. Yeah, I mean, everybody's fine, family's fine. Save your cards and letters. It's just, you know,
Just one of those days. It's
just
kind of like a Monday, but on a Tuesday.
yeah. Well, see, for us, for Brandon and myself and our family and everybody at Jacob's Tent, yesterday was a holiday, a holy day, so we were off and doing nothing, and so
Nice.
it seemed like, you know, yeah, today
But it
seems
is
like
the start.
Monday. Yeah, that's the bottom line.
Well, I want to say hello to Dawn and Kathy and Telma, Robin, Teresa, Barbara, everybody that's coming in. Hopefully, everybody can see us fine, and we're waiting for all of your comments and everything else when the show gets started. So let's get started. We do have a lot to talk about. I guess the question on everybody's mind, or at least on mine and people that I talk to, they're wondering, are we headed, is America headed towards a civil war? Because it's looking like the lawlessness has is just skyrocketing. It looks like what I call persecution of somebody who has nothing against them, no legal actions that are viable against them or relevant, but he's being persecuted, meaning the president. What are your thoughts about this bill,
Well,
about what's going
well,
on?
the answer to the question is I do. Yes, I do think we're headed toward that. Back in 2000, after the debacle of that election and hanging chads and all those kinds of things, um, some of the words that were used to describe George Bush back in the day prompted me to write an article called "The American Uncivil War." And politics has always been kind of uncivil, if you ask me, but it is 100 times worse than it was in 2000. And so I cannot see how, and I hate to say this, I cannot see how we're going to avoid something like that. And we've already had bloodshed in one way or the other here and there, but it's getting out of hand. And I want to go back to something I say again and again and again, and I am more and more convinced of it. And that is Donald Trump is to the radicals in this country, progressives, Marxists, socialists, leftists, whatever you want to call them, he is to them what Jerusalem is to the nations. It is exposing their just utter hatred for, biblical standard, constitutional principle, all of these things that are about borders, boundaries, law, order, all of these kinds of things. It is a lawless mentality, and it is pervasive in our culture today. And that is, I believe, the impetus behind this so-called impeachment inquiry. And I feel like that it eventually, and I hope that I'm wrong, but I feel like eventually it's going to spill over into the streets more so than it has already.
Well, when you talk to people and you talk to people on the left, I mean, it's so weird. It's like they have forgotten that the law exists, and they don't really care whether or not there's any fact base, anything to back it up. They just want this president gone too, because they've listened to the Democrats in Congress say he needs to be out, he's lawless, he needs to be impeached, basing it on nothing. We talked about this a little bit last week when we talked about Ukraine, and then you had said something on the order of like, I don't know what's going on, but it's I don't know that much about Ukraine. By now, it's a household word, right?
Right.
Everybody knows about Ukraine and the craziness behind it. We had a phone call that the president of the United States had with the president of another country A country that, by the way, and nobody wants to talk about this, that we have a treaty with Ukraine to look into any type of criminal activity. We've had this treaty since back in like 1998 or something like that. That alone should have stopped the conversation. It didn't stop the conversation. And then we had Adam Schiff, who is the chair of the House Intel Committee, a Democrat, who basically goes in front of America, reads a parody, and tries to pass it off as the truth.
Well, he knew exactly what he was doing. I mean, these guys are sadistically smart. He gave the news media what they wanted so that they could re-air this thing, and as an afterthought, he says, well, it was at least in part a parody. No, it's a lie, and he knew it was a lie, but he knew that the media would replay that, and unfortunately, so many uninformed and, dare I say, ignorant people in the American populace would never hear the part about it being a parody or anything. They would just take it at face value and think that's exactly what happened. They know what they're doing. They do it well. They've been doing it for a long, long time. And that is why I believe, or at least in part, why they are inconsiderate of the law and what the law has to say, and at this point don't care, because they know that, unfortunately, there's enough people out there in the masses of people who are themselves lawless, don't care what the laws are. We want what we want based on our emotions, our feelings, our appetites at that particular instant. And this is the epitome of lawlessness. This is what the Bible said would occur. I'm not surprised, obviously distraught, disappointed, all those kinds of things, but I'm not really surprised, because this is the end result. This is the fruit that is, comes naturally when we abandon what is true, what is pure, what is holy. This is what's going to happen. It's just, I guess my prayer in all of this, Susan, is that as it becomes so obvious how corrupt some of these people are, I mean, can't even conceal it anymore.
I know.
My hope is that somehow, some way, the Almighty causes it to just blow up, and let the chips fall where they may, and let those who are unjust, let those who are corrupt, let those who are wicked and evil be exposed for what they are, and then hopefully some kind of reason will come into play and justice will be employed. That's the only thing I can hope and pray for at this point.
Well, I keep waiting for the GOP. I keep thinking, where are they? Why aren't they giving back some of what we're getting? Why aren't we doing hearings? Why aren't we telling people to come in? Why aren't we telling Adam Schiff and continuing to fight until Adam Schiff is removed? At least he's removed as the chair of the House Intel Committee for pulling that stunt. Why are we so silent on our own side?
Well, I mean, I don't know, obviously. I don't know. None of those guys have called me of late and to inform me just what it is that they're thinking here. I think it's possible that some of it is following, how do I want to say this? There's things that the president could do and hasn't. And it kind of makes me wonder, is he trying to just give them enough rope until they hang themselves? Now, some people can question that strategy, and I don't know. He hasn't called me either to discuss this. Yeah. But it just kind of makes me wonder, because I've thought about that. I put myself in certain situations, or I've found myself in certain situations where people were doing this, that, and the other, saying this, that, and the other, and my temporal reaction was to respond, defend myself, say things like that. But then there was that part of me that says, no, just wait, and let's flush everybody out. Let's see who's who. Yeah. Then respond. So I don't know if that's what's going on here. I would like to think that's some of what is going on here. Going back to the Ukraine thing, I mean, Trump let the whole Mueller thing play out, and then it was, it came to nothing. And so now he's making a move on Ukraine, and what's happening, seems to me, is the reason the left is freaking out is because he's on their trail. Barr is on their trail. There's some things that are about to be are being uncovered about Joe Biden and his son, things that weren't really hidden, but things that weren't really at the forefront of the national conversation. And now all of a sudden, because they're talking about Trump in Ukraine, they're also talking about Biden in Ukraine. To the point that, Joe Biden's people called up all these different news agencies to say, you cannot book Rudy Giuliani. We demand that you not book him. Why? Because they don't want him talking, obviously.
Yeah, speaking the truth.
So why haven't we, the Republicans or the conservatives, why haven't they responded in like kind? I don't know. I'm hopeful that some of it is, as I said, letting it just kind of all unpack here, flush everybody out, like the Jeff Flakes, like the Mitt Romneys and others, and then make your move. But then again, on the other hand, Susan, it might be because they're too busy going to cocktail parties. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could very well be. Now, Kim said, doesn't say Trump is evil, are so blind. If he was evil, all those people wouldn't be fighting him. It would be smooth sailing. Trump is good and has been appointed by God, and that's why they're fighting him. Chum for the Sharks, a feeding frenzy, Linda said. About a week prior to leaving office, he expanded the spy information shared from 3 offices to 18. Why? So it would be harder to find the mole. They need to close that gap. And Vicki is talking about Obama. He did that. He left it the way it was the whole time, 8 years, but right before he left, he expanded that information and also to give them the raw data of what's going on. Dr. Hasbrook is from, D. Lorraine Hasbrook is from Wilkes-Barre. Is that how you say it? Wilkes-Barre? I have no idea. PA. And corruption is on both sides, I believe. Barbara Darby said, we need Schiff's transcripts from the last 90 days. Yes. And we also, here's what else we need for transcripts. We need to know what Obama was saying about to Putin. We need to know what Obama knew about Ukraine. Let's get all those phone conversations that Obama had with Joe Biden and Biden had with Ukraine and maybe what Obama had with Ukraine. Let's get all of those phone conversations as well. Barbara said maybe the handle will fall, and heard the other 3 are being looked at now. And some of the things that I think what they're trying to do, we have Barr, who's going over, we found out he's going in Italy, he went to the Ukraine, he went to the UK, he's gone to Australia. I mean, he's asked the president to help. So they wanted to make a big deal out of it. I think it was the New York Times yesterday or WAPO, one of the two, came out and tried to make a big deal about Australia. And it's kind of like, the president talked about that months ago and said that Barr, openly in public, that Barr is going to be going over and looking into corruption and all those things in these places. And so everything that they seemingly try to do is being tossed out there for everybody to see what fools they are. And it amazes me, though, the way I look at it. They're full throttle ahead trying to take down this president. And Bill, I liken it to a football game. If person is over here and, the ball is thrown and they're running from one zone and going to the end zone, you don't let them run to the end zone. You just don't back up and go, okay, go ahead, go to the end zone. You block them, you tackle them, whatever you have to do. Why isn't the GOP doing that? And I know you.
Well, I agree. You don't do that unless they're running to the wrong end zone.
That's true. Good point. And hopefully that's what we're going to see. And hopefully the information that Barr has and that the other people who are working on this investigation all come out, and it would be great if it comes out and takes these people down. But if there's such lawlessness, are we going to be able to have a grand jury indictment, perhaps, to prosecute these people? Or are they all just going to go free because of the lawlessness that we're seeing?
Well, that's something no one can answer right now. Nobody knows how it's going to turn out. The only thing that I can truly have confidence in is that in the end, God will render justice. It may not be on my timetable.
Yeah.
And it may not be the way I'd like to see it done. But in the end, He will. In the interim, what you and I must do, and all of us must do, is, we can't be silent about what is right, what is just. We cannot allow our lives, our soul, to be tainted with this lawlessness and this corruption. That's going to be, that's going to be hard, because it's hard to get up every day and see this going on and not become angry. And I don't mean just, frustrated. I mean angry, and wanting to do something. We can't let our souls be tainted by the corruption that seems to come so naturally to some. And I saw the video of, and Brandon, if you can, turn my monitor down just a hair. That would be very helpful. Saw the video of Schiff walking through some airport in South Carolina, and somebody was trying to ask him some questions, and just that little smug look he has on his face. Now, the old Bill, I'm gonna take my believer hat off, and I'm gonna just put the old Southern redneck hat on for just a moment. My dad used to say, "I'm gonna knock that look off your face in just a minute, boy." Yep. That's kind of what went through my mind when I saw that little smug look. Now, I'm going to put my believer cap back on, all right? When you see things like that, it's hard for it not to just want to creep in and taint your soul. But we cannot allow that to happen. Let's continue to raise the issue. Let's continue to speak for what is right and what is just. And in spite of President Trump's, personal warts and flaws, which we all have, the fact is that as far as I can see, he's not really done anything that is illegal. He certainly hasn't done anything that appears to be in his own best interest. Of course, his political enemies think his reelection would be a travesty, and therefore that's what they're all trying to stop. Nancy Pelosi more or less said it. That Congressman Green from Texas, he more or less said, we need to impeach this guy so he won't get reelected. So that's really their motive. But as far as what the president has done on behalf of the United States, if he is doing things in the interests of the United States, and it seems to me that he serving in the Oval Office right now anyway is in the interests of the United States, then hey, I'm all for it, and I'm going to pray for him, and I'm going to defend those things that are done in the interest of this country. And I go back to something I said earlier. I just believe that his being there and doing what he's doing and pulling the covers back on the pervasive corruption that is in Washington, that's what they're upset about.
Now, Barbara said no matter what phone call it is, there are 3 scribes writing it, listening at all times, supposed to be a big secret, no more. Barbara Darby said, I believe once the FISA report comes out, we'll see things moving quicker. She's praying for that. So it's in the Situation Room and easy to track, or the office is bugged. There's a camera there in the Oval Office. Thank you, Margaret, for your blessings. Yep, a demon smirk, Barbara said. Right when POTUS got into office, he expanded the circumstances by which civilians can be tried in military tribunals. Government employees were always subject to tribunals from crimes like treason and sedition. That's right. We can't let anger get out of control. Let God have the vengeance, Kim said. And Barbara said she's an old, well, she was talking about Nancy being, sort of imbibing on things. But, the way I was listening to a former CIA agent today that said President Trump really needs to go in and investigate the CIA, because that they're looking at the whistleblower, quote unquote, whistleblower complaint. And of course, it looks like it was written by a law firm. And they also think what he was saying, the CIA agent, former CIA agent, that it looks like there's a group of people that probably are still in the CIA, Obama holdovers that have been there for years, that don't like the president, that probably are involved in all this too, which sounds like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page in the Mueller report. I mean, we're seeing the same thing, just a different department.
So what you're saying then, or what's being implied here, is the CIA is running a, what do they call it?
A coup.
Yeah, well, they're what they do in other countries and trying to bring about a silent coup. That's what they're trying to do
Exactly.
Here.
That's exactly right. And to think that's in our country. Did you ever think that you would see that? Did you ever? And I'm sure this has gone on in our lifetime that we never realized it before, but God is exposing everything right now.
Well, that's the reason I said what I did. It's my hope and my prayer. I hope he is. Now, it's going to be ugly and painful, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to probably spill over in some areas that we weren't expecting. And it's probably going to bring to light some things that might even challenge us, you know, and how we think about some things. Yeah. But the point is that I believe he is. I hope he is. I trust he is. I pray he is. And personally, for me and my family, I just want to be where he wants us to be in the middle of all this, because in the day of adversity, boy, you better be on his side. You better be in right standing with him. And that's the sense I have. I told our congregation the other day, and unrelated to this topic, but related to many things that are going on in our world, I just feel something building. I feel like there's something that's building, and the adversary's out here doing all kinds of things. It's crazy, it's bizarre, it's lawless, and yet all of that is a response or a reaction to what God is doing, because you know the adversary senses what the Creator is doing in the spiritual world, and that's going to manifest in this earth. And that's when you really get down to it. What these people are so upset about, I believe anyway, goes beyond Trump. Oh, it goes beyond that, the person, and it gets into what God is doing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And Lisa said God is exposing all the corruption. And as Barbara Darby pointed out, they changed that whistleblower form. Yeah. What was it, a week maybe?
Yeah,
before?
Well, just a week or two, yeah. Isn't that special? So.
Yeah. Just a coincidence.
Just a coincidence, yeah. No, nothing to see here, folks. Move along.
Now, one of the things I want to play a video that Brandon has one from Mitch McConnell talking a little bit about his what he'll do with impeachment if it comes to him from the House.
I wouldn't want to go into next year's election having it credibly said that all you did for the whole Congress was harass the president and try to remove him from office.
That said, Senator, what does happen in the Senate if the House does get through with this inquiry and decide that they are going to impeach President Trump?
Well, under the Senate rules, we're required to take it up if the House does go down that path, and we'll follow the Senate rules.
There had been some discussion about, people literally going back to the Constitution and arguing there is no mandatory act on behalf of the Senate. Looking back at an interview that you gave in March saying you'd have no choice but to have a Senate trial if the House passed an article or more. But you're saying that if they did, the Senate would move ahead.
Yeah, it's a Senate rule related to impeachment that would take 67 votes to change. So I would have no choice but to take it up. How long you're on it is a whole different matter, but I would have no choice but to take it up based on a Senate rule on impeachment.
Now, did you hear what he said? Did you hear the attorney speak there? Mm-hmm. Saying how long you're on it is another story. So he's going to take it up, but it may open and close in 30 seconds. That is possible that he would just open it, close it, we're done. So.
Yeah, well, I also like the comment about some people are talking about actually going back to the Constitution and seeing what it has to say. Because so far the House has not followed the rules when it comes to impeachment in the first place. There's not been any kind of a vote on the floor about any of this. This has been Nancy Pelosi and others talking.
Right. Well, and see, I think the way she gets around that is saying it's an impeachment inquiry.
Right.
This isn't the full impeachment process.
This isn't the process.
Right. But if she starts the process, then she's going to have a vote, and she's going to have all those people who are sitting there in, red and some purple states that are going to have to answer to their constituents. Let's see what happens there.
And I think it's important, Susan, for everyone listening to know that the impeachment process has not really started.
Nope.
This is all just talk. This is floating stuff out there to get the media going, to ramp it up, to drive the polls, to see what kind of support there is for this. These politicians are slick.
They're very slick, and they know that. And they did this right before their vacation that they don't deserve to have, 2 weeks after, campaigning the whole time. Mitch McConnell doesn't like Trump, so he'll let things go, Kim said. I don't know about that, Kim. I know he doesn't like President Trump, but it would not be to his benefit and to the country's benefit. So I don't know if he would be that selfish. Maybe.
Who knows? But I think he'd be shooting himself in the foot
Yes, I think so too.
I think so, not to mention his wife.
Yes. Yeah. Now, Lisa Margaret says it's election interference. And it is. It's absolutely a scheme by the Democrats to interfere with the 2020 election and to make sure that they win. And because they have nothing to run on. This is it.
Yeah,
this is their one chance.
Well, Mitch McConnell said that just now, that the only thing they did in this Congress is to push impeachment. And they're not even doing that efficiently. But they are doing what they accused Trump of doing, interfering with an election to try to drive it one way. I mean, it seems to me that if you're a politician or you're a candidate and you're running for an office, you want to influence the election. You really want to influence people to vote for you. Now, within legal parameters, mind you, but they're doing, I think, they're pushing the legality of this to the very limits. Now, it's unethical, it's immoral, but it's just like the whistleblower complaint. You think a lot of people think some law firm wrote it. Well, why? So they don't put their foot in it. They don't say something, go one step too far that's going to come back and bite them. But they're going to push the ethics and the morality to its legal limits.
Now, Dawn said the media is also, the local newspapers have started to ramp it up and talk about it as being impeachment. And Kim said that's where people are confused. They believe Trump is definitely going to be impeached or removed. And like you said, and we talked about, they haven't even started the process. Lisa said the conservatives have been censored and harassed unbelievably, and our amendments rights have been violated daily. Our constitutional rights have been violated. And Barry said President Trump hasn't done anything that I oppose yet. And he really hasn't.
Yeah,
and
I don't think so either.
No. And censorship is real because as I was talking to Brandon before the show, I've been restricted again on Facebook and I have been shadow banned on Twitter. And if you think about it, from my reach isn't like a President Trump's reach or an AOC. If they're doing that to me, what are they doing to other conservatives that have a bigger platform even than what I have? It's amazing.
I'm going to get Brandon to make a graphic that put up on the screen that every time you go to Facebook jail, you're going to show up on the screen with bars.
You're going to have to just constantly put it up there. And I'll tell you, as it gets closer to the election, we're going to see that more and more and more of people being on Facebook, conservatives being shadow banned, being restricted, put in Facebook jail, whatever. It's happening and it is real. If you talk about the politics at all, it'll happen.
I believe that. And something just occurred to me. You talk about, or you ask, is America headed toward another civil war? If the Congress does, in fact, impeach Trump, of course, that doesn't mean he's going anywhere. That just means he's impeached. And then it goes to the Senate. And if there are people in the Senate, if there's enough Republicans to join with the Democrats that would do this, which I don't think there are, but if there were, you're talking about civil war? You're talking about people taking to the streets? I think that would push it to the very limit. I hope that doesn't happen, but I'm just thinking out loud here. I know that there are people who would absolutely say that's enough.
Well, and not only that, but they're already on the left started talking about and sort of just throwing it out there every now and then. Oh, if we can remove Trump and we can remove Pence because he was involved in Ukraine, then we can get to President Pelosi. You want to see people taken to the streets? Get that to happen. Yeah,
it's like Katharine Hepburn would be the president, I mean, some bad Katharine Hepburn impersonation. But anyway, well, let's go on past that because that's making my stomach feel sour.
Now, Kim said people are getting their Twitter accounts taken down left and right. Linda Queen says, free Susan Knowles, free Susan Knowles. Absolutely. Somebody's going to speak up. Let's see the tweet number one, what President Trump thought the other day about what Adam Schiff did. Representative Adam Schiff illegally made up a fake and terrible statement, pretended to be mine as the most important part of my call to the Ukrainian president, and read it aloud to Congress and the American people. It bore no relationship to what I said on the call, arrest for treason. And then there was talk about him, President Trump mentioning treason, and with treason, the penalty is usually death. They mentioned something about Trump before that and said that the left did, and talked about it being a penalty of death, and went on the talk shows and said that, but that was perfectly fine. This, on the other hand, is not okay.
I believe with my whole heart that there are many people who have committed treason against this nation.
Yes, absolutely.
And many politicians, media personnel, in my view, have done things or said things that are treasonous. Whatever will become of that, and if anyone ever agrees with me, I don't know, but that's my feelings on it. That's happened abundantly in the last decade.
Mark and Shannon Radley say, what steps must occur for there to be a civil war? Imagine the steps. I don't think it has to be official, Mark. I think people will just take to the streets, and something will ensue from that, whether it's, your typical civil war from days gone by, or just people saying I've had enough.
Well, and let me say this too, just in case there's some body who's just kind of in and out, not really listening to the entirety of the conversation. No one here is advocating for civil war.
No.
We don't want that. That would be disastrous for everybody. But what we're saying is that there are enough people in this country on either side of this issue that are passionate enough that if you push them far enough, they're going to react, they're going to respond. And now, I believe that there are people on the left who would love to push people on the right to that point.
Absolutely.
And which is why we, as believers, need to be a voice of restraint, that this does not afflict our soul, that doesn't contaminate our soul. We speak out against things that are unjust and unrighteous and wicked, absolutely. But, how we respond to it needs to be in line with, what God's will is in all this stuff.
Exactly.
So just because we're talking about civil war doesn't mean we're advocate for it, pushing for it. No, we want to pull back from that. We don't want that, because that's when lawlessness will really be pervasive in this country. Anything will go at that point in time, and nobody will be safe.
Yeah, and the globalists really would love that. And that's why you have to fight against that, doing anything like that. Barbara said, God had enemies turn on themselves in battle, and I believe he still might do that. He never changes. And that could be very well what happens. And I hope that the confusion reigns. And we talked about that a while ago, Bill. I think you pointed that out, that, maybe that will be something that they will be interrupted. God will interrupt what they're doing.
Yeah, there's lots of examples of what she mentioned in the Bible. 2 Chronicles 20 comes to mind. But by the time the people of Judah got to the battlefield, the enemy was already wiped out because they had turned on one another. And by the way, in small measure, that has been happening in this camp, which is very, very, well, let's just say it's interesting to me.
Yeah, the socialists and progressives have been going after the people who have been in the Democrat Party for a long time. And it is their goal to remove those people from the current Democrat Party and put in new progressives and socialists. That's been said. That's not a secret. Cranky Pants said we are already in a cultural civil war, and that it's a cold civil war that we're in. Margaret said
I agree.
They're trying hard to create more racism. Absolutely. This racism card was pulled out the moment they didn't get their way in the election. So again, what you're saying, what we've been saying here all along, you need to be aware of where the left, the progressives and globalists and elitists are trying to push you, and don't be sucked into that. Don't get into lawlessness yourself. Right. Follow biblical principles, because that's exactly what they want. Now we have tweet number 2 from Matt Getz. I want a little bit what he had to say about what Adam Schiff did. Plain and simple, Representative Adam Schiff is a hypocrite. I love that. He basically just, has called him out for everything he's done, and it is true. And that's what we need, just simple calling out. Now, here's where President Trump kind of got himself in trouble again with the left, although he's never not been in trouble with the left. Tweets number 3 through 6. Let's look at those. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats can't put down the impeachment match. They know that they couldn't beat him in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, and they're increasingly aware of the fact that they won't win again against him in 2020, and impeachment is the only tool they have to get rid of Donald J. Trump. And the Democrats don't care if they burn down and destroy this nation in the process. I have never seen the evangelical Christians more angry over any issue than this attempt to illegitimately remove this president from office, overturn the 2016 election, and negate the votes of millions of evangelicals in the process. They know the only impeachable offense that President Trump has committed was beating Hillary Clinton in 2016. That's the unpardonable sin for which the Democrats will never forgive him. If the Democrats are successful in removing the president from office, which they will never be, it will cause a civil war-like fracture in this nation from which our country will never heal. Now, that's Pastor Robert Jeffress who said that. President Trump just retweeted it. Mm-hmm. And now they're saying people are coming out, Harvard law professors, AOC, and other people. This is an impeachable offense of itself because he's calling for civil war, which he clearly did not call for.
You know, look, these people are going to get their britches in a wad regardless of what he does and says. You might as well go ahead and give them something to talk about, you know, something just to go ahead and push them over the edge. I'm not talking about saying something illegal or things that would incite people to violence, but just simply retweeting, what the pastor said. I didn't say it in those many words, but we're talking about the same thing. It's because we live in the real world and we see what's going on here. Look, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016. That's not a secret. And I wasn't a Trump fan when all this started. But I tell you what, it's what he's done, and particularly in terms of Jerusalem and Israel, the border, those kinds of things, and defending people of faith. It's what he has done, and it's what his enemies have done that have turned me into a Trump supporter. Yep. And particularly when it comes to the AOCs and the Pelosi's and the Adam Schiffs and the Chuck Schumers and Hillary Clinton and on and on and on and on. They have turned me into an avid Trump supporter. And I guarantee you there are millions more just like me who weren't really for Trump, but they see what this has done and how these people are immorally trying to put their people in so they can run this thing the way they want to. And I guarantee you that's going to be reflected in the polls come 2020.
Well, as you say, you know, compare the fruit, and you can see the comparisons of fruit, who has done more for the country, who is hurting the country. It's really obvious, and all people have to do is just look. Robinson, same for her. She now supports Trump 100%. I will have to say I supported Trump 100% from the very beginning, and I did vote for President Trump. Come on now. Not in the primaries. No, not in the primaries. Not in the primaries. Not in the primaries. That's true. But I did vote for him, and I was, once there was no more Ted Cruz, then I went over to President Trump after prayer. Yeah. And I have supported him ever since. And he's done nothing that I see that is an impeachable offense or illegal or anything else. In fact, he's probably been one of the more honest presidents that we've ever had in recent history.
Brutally so.
Brutally so, yes. And I like that. So, you know, I'm a fan of that.
Well, at least you know what you got, you know?
Exactly. And you know, one of the things, we don't have time to go into it because we have other subjects that we do need to talk about, but I want everybody to go and do some research on Christopher Hines, who is the stepson to John Kerry. I also want you to look at Hunter Biden and who Archer, a person named Archer that they got in contact with, and go look at the dealings from the beginning when Joe Biden was vice president, when Kerry was still a viable person in administration, how all of these people seemingly, if you look at the record, not only in the Ukraine, but they benefited in China by the fact that Joe Biden was the vice president. And especially look up anything having to do with Rosemont Seneca, or Rosemont, anything with Rosemont Venture, you will have your mind blown. And again, I could go into detail. We just really don't have time to do all of that, and the connections and how these people benefited financially. We've let the Clinton Foundation, we didn't go pursue that. We should have done that, in my opinion. This sounds just like the Clinton Foundation pay to play. And when you go read it, I think that you'll see it's exactly what happened here. And hopefully this will come out in the wash, as they say, when Barr gets finished investigating everything. And this is why, Joe Biden doesn't want Giuliani talking, because Giuliani has all this stuff.
Yeah. I saw something where Giuliani said the reason they want to pull me in front of Congress is because I've got a guy ready to stand up and point the finger at Joe Biden.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it is serious. And why? Well, you know why we didn't go back and, long ago and talk to Joe Biden. And that's why I say too, how much did Obama know was going on between Biden and his son and Ukraine and China and people getting rich?
Everything.
And yeah, everything. And typically sometimes, and I'm not accusing anybody, but a lot of times if you're doing the same thing, you're not going to point somebody else out. Now, Darlene Dine said voted for Cruz in the primaries, but I don't think he would have beat Hillary. He wouldn't have. I'm convinced of that. Lisa said those that were undecided before are now very decided to vote for Trump. Family money laundering, Dawn said. Thank God for Rudy Giuliani. And Kim said, I've been a Trump supporter from the beginning. I love it that he doesn't sugarcoat things. Absolutely. Barbara Darby said, I love his transparency. Absolutely. And it's so funny, when all of this is going on, we still have the left saying, oh, Mr. President, just because you're under an impeachment inquiry doesn't mean you can't go ahead with gun control legislation and doing other things. The left never gives up. And it's so sickening. And if people can't see how sickening it is, I pity them.
Do you have any good news today?
I do, but Bill Phillips said Obama didn't know he was too busy setting up the lighting for the White House. Lisa said Giuliani knows this is all a sham going on to attack the president. And again, Giuliani has he has everything that they need. All they have to do is just bring an indictment.
And Giuliani also has experience in fighting corruption.
Yes, big time. Fought the mob and won.
And won.
All right, so let's go on to another subject. It's not good news, Bill. If we could roll video 2, we'll try to help Bill afterwards.
Last name Flaherty is running City Hall.
Hey, folks, here we are at Boston City Hall Plaza on this beautiful late September Sunday morning, September 29th of 2019, where they're about to raise the flag of Communist China on City Hall Plaza. This is something we've been doing for a number of years now, but thankfully more and more people are coming out against it. And you see groups like the Falun Gong and the Free Hong Kong and Free Tibet people are here in force to oppose it. Here they are flying U.S. flags. But you don't see a whole lot of Americans and not too many Bostonians here in protest of this outrageous event. But we're going to bring this information to not just to the city, but to the rest of the country and the world, that we're on record. We're not standing for this. And this is the same city that's denied us, Camp Constitution, the permit to raise the Christian flag on the very same flagpole. now they're playing the Chinese anthem, the communist anthem, as they raise the communist flag on City Hall Plaza.
In my opinion, they might as well have been raising the ISIS flag that day. I was so infuriated watching that. I can't even tell you. This was in Boston. This was condoned by the city council there. This was to celebrate communism. Oh, so
I'm it seems to me there needs to be a revival of the Sons of Liberty.
Yes.
Sam Adams and all of those people back in the day, Revere. It would be bad enough anywhere. I can almost see something like that happening in San Francisco or Seattle or Portland or places like that. But in Boston, this is where 15, 20 miles outside of Boston in Concord and in Lexington, where at the old North Bridge on the Lexington Green, where the shot "Heard Round the World" was fired. And, these farmers and these shopkeepers were not going to live under tyranny. And, those British regulars marched out, by the way, to take weapons from them they felt like they were not allowed to have. And that's what started the whole thing, really, or that's what it really kind of how it escalated. But for something like that to happen in Boston it's not only maddening, disturbing, it's almost a bit prophetic, and that scares me.
Yeah, I know. It does me too. Now, that film was by Camp Constitution, and it's an organization that basically teaches children about the Constitution. They have a camp for kids that teach the Constitution. That event was on Sunday, and I'll tell you, if I had been there at that event, I wouldn't be here today because they would have taken me away.
You'd be in jail. Is that what you're saying?
I'd be in jail.
You'd be in Boston jail, not just Facebook.
I'd be in Boston jail. Now, Eric,
it would have been hard for me to control myself.
Yeah. Eric Payton said, as a veteran, it burns his tail. And it would have, I'm not a veteran. My parents and my father was a veteran, and my brothers are vets. And all of that put together with seeing that communist flag flying next to the American flag was just too much for me. It was really too much for me.
You know what? If you're an American, it ought to chap your hide. It was the Chinese flag that came across the border during the Korean conflict, and killed, many of our young men in service. I just think of all the millions and millions of people who have died under that flag, and that mentality and that philosophy of communism.
It's unconscionable. And that city council person, whoever okayed that, they should be fired. They should be, if I were in Boston, I wouldn't invite them back into Boston. Let's just say that.
Yeah, well, I hope the Red Sox lose.
Yeah. Now, Wanda said if they love communist China, they need to go back there. Shame on Boston. Margaret said the despair is not in them doing that, but in a few standing speaking against it. There were people who were there and who were trying to, shout against it, but it didn't do any good. They went ahead and did it anyway. Dawn said she would be in jail for sure as well. Our children are so indoctrinated in public schools, Lisa said. Lisa said, it's getting really depressing. It's changing my mood. Not sure if this is weakness, but it's too much every day. And we do see this every day. Carol said, sorry, Susan, but I know how you feel. All misinformation being taught. And that's, even more reason why we need to tell and teach our children about communist China, about what it was, and how this isn't about, accepting others and being embracing diversity. Now, this is communist China we're talking about, and that communist China flag should have no place in our country. No flagpole ever should raise the communist flag in the United States ever.
No. And
Okay.
and that's all I got to say about that.
That's all I got to say. Now we're going to go from communist China into another subject about Facebook Messenger and about I hate to tell you this, but Facebook Messenger is a big reason why there is child pornography on the internet. A recent report from the New York Times entitled "The Internet is Overrun with Images of Child Sexual Abuse" went wrong. According to the report, 12 million of 18.4 million, or 2 out of every 3 reports of child pornography online, come from Facebook Messenger.
I'm sorry, forgive my ignorance. Is Facebook Messenger different from Facebook?
Yeah, it's basically the instant message. That's where you have a private message or whatever.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, it's part for those who are, on Facebook. It's just a private message that you can private message somebody back and forth. And Facebook is talking about that they're also going to now encrypt that. And there is a secret part to that instant messenger that I found out. And I'm sure that's probably where the pornography is going back and forth. But knowing that, Facebook knowing what these statistics are and being told, they're going to make it even easier by encrypting Facebook Messenger.
Well, it kind of makes me think what I thought about when I stopped shopping at Target. If they're going to support certain things, then I can't support them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I know. Trust me. And I'm just learning at this. Also, Microsoft's Bing search engine reportedly regularly submitted reports that lacked essential information, which made police investigations almost impossible to track down people and that were dealing in child pornography, and also Snapchat. So parents beware.
Yeah. Well, just recently, Brandon brought it to Beth and my attention about, how Snapchat's being used. And so we told our 2 younger ones if they had a Snapchat account, immediately it was to be disabled and deleted and all that, And, when we were growing up, I mean, we had things, we did things, there was stuff out there, on the fringes. But I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but, the worst of it was National Geographic,
Yeah.
And when they did something in Africa, but today it's just like it's everywhere. These kids turn, not just kids, but adults too. But
adults,
it's just everywhere. It's unbelievable. And gosh, I understand why there's some people who just want to go out and live in the middle of the woods and not have any contact with the outside world for the sake of their children. I get it. And so we're going to have to be extremely diligent as parents and grandparents to protect our children from this stuff, from these perverts and from these businessmen who a dollar is all they care about.
Yeah, it's very sad. Now, I want to move from that subject on to, we talked about last week, we talked about Israel, we talked about the elections, where it was going to go.
And what did I say? What did I say?
Never till it's over. What did you say? Remind us.
I said I just am going to be really surprised if Netanyahu is not in this somehow. So.
But and so basically what we're doing is the reins were kind of given over to Netanyahu because the Arab list, a couple of them said no, we're not backing Gantz, we're backing Netanyahu. So he got one more seat. The President Rivlin gave him the opportunity to get a Knesset together and get the government together. But it's looking more and more now, if you can believe the rumors, that's not going to happen. They may be going to a third election.
Well, and that's what I kind of expected would happen, to be honest with you. That's like, I'm just kind of feeling like he's still going to be in this somehow. I didn't put it that way, but I think we talked about, we wouldn't be surprised to see that there's another election going on in 6 months. And it looks like that may very well happen.
Well, and I want to ask you too about this. When we have right now our country in turmoil and in chaos. I mean, it totally is more so than I've ever seen a country in turmoil in America. Even with Bill Clinton's impeachment, It was like, okay, Bill's getting impeached for doing whatever, but the country went on. And then we have Israel, who is in the same type of chaos. Their government, they don't really have a government. They're trying to put one together. How vulnerable does this leave the United States? How vulnerable does this leave Israel when we're talking about this type of turmoil?
Well, you look at it two different ways. Where Israel's concerned, and this other guy, Gantz, I don't really know a whole lot about him. I don't know what his track record is. They say he's a military man, but there's a lot of military men who are very, very progressive and liberal. On one hand, I think the unknown makes Israel vulnerable. With Netanyahu, you kind of know what you got. You know how he's going to respond in certain situations, and so far, and he's been on the political scene in Israel for many, many years, decades now. He is a staunch supporter of his nation, and he's going to respond with strength. That's what you're going to get. So the uncertainty of the other, I think, is, it leaves a big question mark where the vulnerability of Israel is concerned. Now, on the other hand, and this relates to the relationship Israel has with the United States, I have long believed that there had to come a day that Israel would no longer count on the United States, no longer be able to count on the United States, because ultimately God wants Israel to look to the God of Israel as their sole defender, their sole source of sustenance and protection and blessing and prosperity. So, and I still believe that day will come. I really do. And that's it's not to sound disparaging toward the president or this nation. It's just, eventually, God is going to have it that way. So that thought brings to mind something a rabbi supposedly predicted a long, long time ago. And that is, and I'm going to paraphrase it, and don't ask me the guy's name because I can't remember it right now, but he predicted that there would come a day that Israel would hold elections, but they would not have a government. And in that day, you would know that we could hear the footsteps of the Messiah. In other words, they believed the Messiah would be coming very close to that time. So the scenario that's shaping up right now, it's very interesting, isn't it? They've had elections, 2 of them, and don't really have any clear-cut picture of where the country's going to go as far as government is concerned. And then you look at what's going on in the United States and the talk of civil war, and not just from the right, mind you, from the left too. We are in a civil war. It's just not with guns right now. It's with words. It's those kinds of things. And by the way, that's the way it was in the 1850s, leading up to the first shots of the Civil War in 1861. But anyway, excuse me. You see what's going on in this nation and the uncertainty here. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, between Israel and the United States, who else is going to be the bastion of freedom?
Well, and when you were talking, you were saying that, what came to my mind when you talk about the rabbi and when you're talking about what's going on, Ezekiel 38 and 39.
Well, I knew that's what you were going to be thinking.
Victoria Joe said, I think eventually Israel is going to have a liberal government in order to receive the Muslim Antichrist. Linda said, God is shaking. Lisa said, elections are so important. And I think that's all true. But, here's what's happening. And this is why I also think the rabbi could be right in a lot of instances. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said on Monday that destroying Israel was now an achievable goal. They said, we have managed to obtain the capacity to destroy the imposter Zionist regime. This was Major General Hussein Salami. I'd change my name if I had that one. But and the deputy commander said that they were going to that if Israel attacks Iran, it will have to collect bits and pieces of Tel Aviv from the Mediterranean Sea. And I love that he's saying that, because this is exactly what God is going to do to the people that come against Israel. And it's like, bring it on, Salami, because God is going to show you who is king.
Well,
I think it's great.
that is
Salami's not kosher.
That was Brandon.
That was Brandon. Yeah, I'm not a ventriloquist. That's what I was getting at. You know, there's all this uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen. And look, the enemies of Israel, the enemies of the United States are watching all this too. And I'm sure
absolutely they are.
I'm sure they're just salivating over all of this.
Yes,
at
absolutely.
the potential vulnerability here. And if they see that, I won't be surprised at all if someone tries to exploit it, which goes back to my point. There's going to come a day when God's going to orchestrate events whereby the people of Israel have nobody to look to except the God of Israel. And I kind of think because Israel and the United States have always kind of run these parallels, you know, there's these things that if it's going on in Israel, you can see a parallel in the United States. And if it's going on in the United States, you can see a parallel in Israel. And there's a reason for that. But it almost kind of brings me to think that perhaps God's orchestrating things here so that we realize the things that we have trusted in, we can't trust in anymore. There's only one we can trust. You know? So.
And we're also so busy with what is happening in our own government that we won't necessarily be able to help Israel, which is exactly what is going to happen in Ezekiel 38:39.
Yeah. There's passages there, and I'll just paraphrase, that there are those nations who look upon what is going on when Gog, the chief prince of the land of Meshech and Tubal, when the Gog of Magog comes down, and there are these nations that look on and say, what are you doing? Have you come to take a spoil? Yeah. But all they're doing, at best, they're just offering some kind of verbal resistance. There's no military intervention. There's no alliance there that, other than those that are invading the mountains of Israel, coming against Israel. And it reads as if when this happens, it will look as if Israel is about to be destroyed completely, and then God intervenes.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, it's an interesting time in which we live. Dickens said it was the worst of times. It was the best of times. And interestingly enough, that was from a book called The Tale of Two Cities, and that's what we're dealing with right now. We're dealing with the Tale of Two Cities: Jerusalem and everything that Jerusalem represents, and Babylon, everything that Babylon represents. And I don't mean just geographically. The mindset, the philosophy that is embedded in those two cities. And by the way, Babylon, ancient Babylon, is in present-day Iraq, where all this other stuff's going on. So we are in the Tale of Two Cities, biblically speaking, and it is the best of times, but it's the worst of times because we're in travail.
Right. Now, the deputy commander of operations also said Iran has encircled Israel from all four sides. Nothing will be left of Israel. Israel is not in a position to threaten Iran. And if Israel makes a strategic mistake, it has to collect bits and pieces of Tel Aviv from the lower depths of the Mediterranean Sea. Again, I think it's great news. That's just me. You wanted your good news. There it is, Bill. Lisa said, we're literally one election away from socialism. Robin said, I'm ready for whatever comes, ready for heaven's shore, to see King Jesus. I have peace no matter what. Lisa said, we are also one election away from turning on Israel and all out anti-Semitism. Mark said, what relationship should American Christians have with Israel today? Should we study the things of interest to Israel? Should we find friendly paths with Judaism? What should our relationship should we have with the enemies of Israel? That's a long question that you might want to message Bill about. Dennis said, won't have to worry about elections when Yeshua is king. Lisa said, look at who is in our house. They are already trying to sway people from Israel. Bullies blow hard, let me in or I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down, Linda said about what Iran is saying to Israel. The Bible is coming to pass, Lisa said. But the Bible says everyone will turn on Israel, the great and dreadful days, Barbara Darby said. The Tale of Two Cities, the cities who have become the tail and not the head, Linda said. Harvest and persecution. And Victoria said all Israel needs to do is blink and they could take care of Iran. So, I mean, I just see this not any harm coming to Israel being good news, but the fact that these enemies who think that God is going to stand by and watch them try to come in and destroy his people ain't going to happen. And I love that. I love that.
Well, Zechariah says, and I'm paraphrasing most of it, but when the enemies of Israel are coming in and they've got Jerusalem surrounded, just like this guy said, it says that he is going to roar out of Zion. And, Hebrews 12 talks about how when he speaks, it's going to shake the heavens and the earth. So he is going to roar out of Zion, and I bet you that Salami will wet his pants.
I bet so too. Oh, and I can only say that I would hate to be there, but at the same time, I would love to be there on that day to see that happen in person, because it is going to be unlike anything that we've ever seen. And I just think that we're closer to that than we know. That's, So, and Linda Smith said, we must continue to preach the gospel, and we must continue to pray. And I think, as I've told people who follow me on other shows and on this show, God has been calling me to tell people, I feel, I'm not speaking for God, I just feel it's on my heart to tell people that we need to pray. There's an urgency to pray for our leaders, to pray for our country, to pray for each other, but that God is moved by us praying and is what he wants us to do.
Absolutely. God goes to war sometimes when we pray.
Yes.
His throne becomes his war chariot. That's hinted at 2 Chronicles 22. We're also told to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. And when we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, in effect, I believe anyway, what we're praying for is the return of the Messiah. Because There's not going to really be true peace until the King and the Prince of Peace rules and reigns from Jerusalem. Then, like someone said, we won't have to worry about elections. There won't be any.
Exactly.
We will have already elected the king.
And to know, when you're seeing all of this come to pass, this is what God said would have to come to pass. But look up, your redemption draws nigh.
That's right.
And I honestly think that's where we are. And it does my heart good to know that, God is in control. And that's all we have to remember.
I'm really glad he is, because
Yes.
I definitely am not. So
Exactly. Wouldn't want the job. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody today. Your comments are amazing. As usual, thank you for coming here and being with us each and every week. I want to, especially this week, I ask you, I know every week, but I'm asking you more this week, please share the show. I won't be able to because I'm in Facebook jail.
she's in the jailhouse now.
Again. And so I need you to do what I would do and go to your groups and just, share. So remember the remnant, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Behold, he comes, Linda said. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And again, until next week, God bless you. Take care.
Bye-bye.